Okay, so this worksheet is over completing the square, or using the completing the square method. All right, so for number 1, it wants us to complete the steps below. So first we need to isolate the x squared and x terms on one side of the equation. So they're talking about this and this here. So in order to get these by themselves, I'm going to need to subtract 10 from both sides. So that's going to leave me with 2x squared plus 12x equals negative 10. Next, they're telling me to factor out the GCF. So I'm always going to start with my smallest number to see if that is my greatest common factor. And in this situation it is, because 2 can divide 2 and 2 can divide 12, and it can also divide negative 10. Okay, so that's what we're going to put here is 2, because our GCF is 2. So when we divide out our 2 or factor out our GCF of 2, we get 1x squared plus 6x equals negative 5. And now we're ready to complete the square and solve. All right, so to complete the square, first I'm going to take my b value, which is this right here. So b equals 6, and I'm going to divide that by 2. When I divide that by 2, I get 3. So I'm going to use this 3 right here first to write what my factors for the perfect square trinomial that I'm creating would be. So it would be x plus 3 squared equals negative 5 plus blank. Okay, so that blank is going to be filled by the value that I get whenever I take 3 and I square it, which is 9. So I'm going to put 9 here. And then I'm going to simplify this to x plus 3 squared equals, and negative 5 plus 9 gives me 4. Okay, and now that I have it set up like this, I can take the square root of each side. So that leaves me with x plus 3 equals plus minus this. Plus minus 2, because the square root of 4 is 2. Okay, and then to solve for x, all I need to do is subtract 3 from both sides. So when I do, I get x equals negative 3 plus 2, and x equals negative 3 minus 2. So therefore, my solutions are going to be when it's negative 3 plus 2, I'm going to get negative 1, and when it's negative 3 minus 2, I'm going to get negative 5. All right, so moving on to number 2 here. So I already have it set up in the form of the ax squared plus bx equals c, so I don't have to do anything with moving my numbers around. But what I do notice is that I have to have a value, or a value of 1, and I do not have an a value of 1. But I do see that I have a GCF that equals 2. So that means I'm going to factor out 2 here. So now I'm going to have x squared minus 2x equals 3. Okay. Now that my a value is 1, I can now take my b value, which is negative 2, and I'm going to divide that by 2, and I'm going to get that it's negative 1. So from here, remember, I can write my factors of x minus 1 squared equals 3 plus, and I have to fill in the blank there. Okay, so then to fill in the blank, I have to take this negative 1 right here, and I'm going to square it, which is going to give me 1, and that's going to complete the rest of my equation there. And now I can take all of this and simplify it to x minus 1 squared equals, and 3 plus 1 gives me 4. Okay, and now I have it in the form that I needed in to use the square root method. So I'm going to take the square root of each side. So that leaves me with x minus 1 equals plus minus 2. And then to solve for x, I just simply need to add 1 to both sides. So then I have that x equals 1 plus 2, and x equals 1 minus 2. So therefore my solutions are 3 and negative 1. Okay. All right. right, so number 3. This one is not in this form right here that I need, so what I'm going to have to do is move my b term over here with my a term. So to do that, I'm going to have to subtract 16x from both sides. So that's going to give me 8x squared minus 16x equals 32. And remember, I have to have an a value of 1, so I have to find my greatest common factor and factor it out. And in this case, my GCF is going to be equal to 8. So I'm going to take each term and divide it by 8. And when I do that, I get x squared minus 2x equals 4. Okay. Now I can take my b term, which is now negative 2. So b equals negative 2. And I'm going to divide that by 2. And that gives me negative 1. So I'm going to use this negative 1 to write my factors of x minus 1 squared equals, remember, I'll have 4 plus whatever is going to go right there. Okay, so now to determine what goes in our blank, remember we're going to take our number, the value that we got when we divided b by 2, which is negative 1, and we're going to square it. And that's going to give us 1. So that's what we're going to fill in our blank with. And then we're going to simplify to x minus 1 squared equals, and 4 plus 1 gives me 5. And now it's all set up so that I can use the square root method. So let's square root each side. So then I'm going to have x minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 5. And then to solve for x, all I need to do is just add 1 to both sides. And then my solutions are going to be x equals 1 plus the square root of 5 and x equals 1 minus the square root of 5. Okay, number 4. Okay, so I can see automatically that my equation, I need to move some stuff around because it's not set up in the form that I need it in. So what I need to do is first subtract 20 from both sides. So when I do that, I get 2x squared plus 20x equals, and 72 minus 20 gives me 52. Okay. Now I can see that my a value is not 1, so I have to do my greatest common factor, and this time I have a GCF of 2. So I'm going to divide each term by 2 to factor out that GCF. So that's going to give me x squared plus 10x equals, and 52 divided by 2 gives me 36. I'm sorry, not 36, it is 26. Okay. All right, so now I'm ready to take my b value, which is 10, and divide that by 2, and I get 5. So from here, I'm able to write down my factors of x plus 5 squared equals 26 plus the blank. And then to fill out my blank, I have to take my value that I got when I divided b by 2, which was 5, and square it. So I get 25, and 25 is what I'll be adding in here. Okay, and now to simplify it, I will combine my like terms. So 26 plus 25 gives me 51. And now I am ready to square root each side. So that's going to go away, and then I have x plus 5 equals plus minus the square root of 51. And then to solve for x, I just need to subtract 5 from both sides. So my solutions are going to be x equals negative 5 plus the square root of 51, and x equals negative 5 minus the square root of 51. Okay. All right, so for number 5, I see that my equation is set up just like how I need it to be, but I do not have an a value of 1. So I'm going to take my smallest number here, 3, to see if it is my GCF, and I see that it can go into each one of them. So my GCF equals 3. So that's what I'm going to divide out from each term. And when I do that, I get x squared plus 4x equals 3. Okay. So now I can take my b value of 4, divide that by 2, and I get 2. So that means my factors are going to be x plus 2 squared, and that's going to be equal to 3 plus my blank. And remember to fill in this blank, we have to take the value that we got when we divided b by 2 and square it. So 2 squared gives me 4, so that's what I'm going to be filling in here. And now I can combine my like terms to simplify. So that gives me x plus 2 squared equals, and 3 plus 4 gives me 7. And now I'm ready to take the square root of each side. So that's going to give me x plus 2 equals plus minus the square root of 7. And then to solve for x, I just need to subtract 2 from both sides. So therefore I would have x equals negative 2 plus minus the square root of 7. And those are my solutions. Okay, so flipping over to the back side. And let's go ahead and eliminate number 7 because we won't be doing that problem. All right, so number 6, it says what is needed to complete the square in the tiles below. So there's 2 different ways that we can do this. We can see that from our tiles here that we have an equation of x squared plus, or I'm sorry, x squared minus, since my little blocks here are shaded in, I know it's a negative, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so that's going to be 6x. So I'm going to have to take my b value, which is negative 6, divide that by 2, and I get negative 3. And then negative 3 squared gives me 9. So I can see that my answer is D. And another way to do it would be just to go ahead and finish out the square by drawing out the rest of the lines. And then you can simply count also as well to see that you get 9. Okay, number 8. It says, what is the solution set of x squared minus 12x equals negative 20? So we're going to use the completing the square method. So first we're going to take our b value, which is 12 here, and we're going to divide that by 2, and that gives us negative 6. So now we know we have x minus 6 squared equals negative 20 plus blank. And then to determine what goes into our blank, we're going to take the negative 6 and we're going to square it, which is going to give us 36. So that's what we're going to add. And then to simplify it, we're going to get x minus 6 squared equals, and negative 20 plus 36 gives me 16. And now I'm ready to square root each side. So that gives me x minus 6 equals plus minus 4. And then to solve for x, I just need to add 6 to both sides. So I have x equals 6 plus 4 and x equals 6 minus 4. So that tells me that my solutions are 10, because 6 plus 4 gives me 10, and 6 minus 4 gives me 2. So therefore my answer is B. All right, number 9. It wants to know which of the following is not a perfect square trinomial. In order for it to be a perfect square trinomial, we have to have perfect numbers in the a value and our c value. So looking at a, I know that this, since I don't have a value right here, that's 1, and 1 is a perfect number because 1 times 1 gives me 1. And 36 is a perfect number because 6 times 6 gives me 36. So I know it can't be a. B, I have 9 as my a value, and 3 times 3 gives me 9, so it's a perfect number. And 4 is my c value, and 2 times 2 gives me 4, so that's a perfect square trinomial. On C, I see that I have 1 as my a value, and 1 is a perfect number. And then I have 12 as my c value, and that is not a perfect number, so then I know that this is the one that's not a perfect square trinomial. Okay, moving on to number 10. What is the approximate length of the missing side of the right triangle shown? Since it's telling us that it's a right triangle, we know that we can use the Pythagorean theorem, which is the a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So our hypotenuse has to be our C value. And then we'll just go ahead and have x be our A and 5 be our B. So now we're ready to set up our equation. So we would have x squared plus 5 squared equals 9 squared. And again, I just pulled all those values from the given triangle. And then we're going to simplify our equation to x squared plus 25, because 5 times 5 gives me 25, equals 81, since 9 times 9 gives me 81. And then we need to subtract 25 from both sides so we can get the x squared by itself. So then that gives me x squared equals 56. And then to solve for x, I just need to take the square root of each side. So then I'm going to have that x equals, and I won't need the plus or minus because I wouldn't have a negative length or a negative side here. So I can just leave that part out. And I just, using my calculator, I'm just going to hit second and then the x squared button, so that, which is right here. So I can get the little square root marker, and then I'm going to enter the 56, hit enter, and I see that I get 7.48, and it goes on and on, but I'm just going to go ahead and round that up to 7.5. So I can see that my answer is B. All right, number 11. It wants us to solve the following equation for A, and our equation is a squared plus 4m equals 12r. Okay, so in order to solve for A, I need to first isolate this a squared. So to do that, I need to subtract 4m from both sides. So that would give me a squared equals 12r minus 4m. And since those are not like terms, I can't combine them, so I'll leave them just like that. And now that I have it in this form, I can go ahead and take the square root of each side, since I'm solving for a and a is squared. So then that gives me a equals plus minus the square root of 12r minus 4m. So therefore my answer is C. Okay, number 12. It says a certain circle has an area of 63.6 centimeters squared, and it wants to know what the approximate radius of the circle is. And it's reminding us that the area for a circle is pi r squared. So we're going to use this formula and plug in the information that we have and then solve for r. So for A, we're going to input the 63.6, since that's our area, and then pi r squared. And since I want to isolate the r squared by itself, I need to divide each side by pi, since the pi and r squared are being multiplied together. So when I do that, I get r squared equals, and I'm going to have to use my calculator here. So 63.6 divided by pi, and that gives me a long, ugly number. So I'm just going to round that to 20.245. And now I can just simply take the square root of each side, since I'm solving for r and r is squared. Okay, so when I do that in my calculator, I'm just going to take the square root, and I get that r equals 4 point, and I'm going to round up to 4.5. So therefore our radius is approximately 4.5 centimeters squared, or centimeters. Okay, so now for number 13, it wants to know what the solution set of x squared minus 14x equals negative 38 would be. So we're going to use the same method that we've been using of completing the square. So we're going to take negative 14 and we're going to divide it by 2, and that is going to give us negative 7. So then we're going to have x minus 7 squared equals negative 38 plus blank. Okay, now to determine what I need to put in my blank there, I'm going to take the negative 7 and I'm going to square it. That's going to give me 49. So that's what I'm going to use in my blank here. And then I'm going to simplify it to x minus 7 squared equals negative 38 plus 49 gives me 11. And now I can use the square root method. So I will square root each side here. So then I have x minus 7 equals plus minus the square root of 11. And then to solve for x, I just need to add 7 to both sides. So then I have x equals 7 plus the square root of 11, and x equals 7 minus the square root of 11. Okay, and then we're going to have to go ahead and I'm going to use the calculator to find out what the approximations of the solutions would be, because that's what these squiggly lines mean, that it's approximately, and then these would be exact, but I know it's not going to be exact because my 11 is not a perfect number. Okay, so in the calculator, I'm just going to plug it in just like I have it written here. So 7 plus the square root of 11 gives me 10.317. But I'm just going to round that to the x equals 10.32. All right, and then for the other one, I'm going to do 7 minus the square root of 11, and that gives me 3.68. So therefore, my answer is going to be D. Okay, and that completes the worksheet on completing the square.